Hello, everybody. Welcome to the long decade, 1989 to 2001. We're actually going to drop back a little bit to 1980 because, well, there's been a change in the Cold War. You know, in the 70s, we had detente when Nixon talking to Brezhnev and even Mao Zedong in China and about easing of tensions. In the 1980s, it goes the other way. There's a ramping up of Cold War tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union. And part of that was due to Ronald Reagan when he won the 1980 election. Well, this is a big theme. It's morning in America, and as you guessed, not everyone was happy about it. So different views of whether or not we can ramp up tensions with the Soviet Union. And, some people have some domestic concerns, but hey, you won the election 1980 and 84, so we're going to run with that. Well, the big deal was with foreign policy that they kind of threw containment out, keeping communism combined. Now they want to roll it back. They want to push communism back. They want to drive it back and, if they can, destroy it. And the first arena of Cold War confrontation was in Central America, where there was a communist uprising in Nicaragua that succeeded, and a civil war in El Salvador with communist rebels. There's a huge military buildup, and the United States starts sticking its nose into the Middle East, particularly what was perceived as Iranian imperialism and trying to bully people around in the Persian Gulf. There was a couple of shootouts, the United States and Iran, a couple skirmishes. Iran came in second. So United States is now starting to push back against communism, where they see it, and also against other countries that have been sort of hostile, upset with the Iranians over the whole embassy thing. So now they're actually trying to pick off Iranian interests where they can. Well, the Soviet Union at this time, their system is literally sick and dying, and I mean literally. Brezhnev dies in 1982, and Yuri Andropov, former head of the KGB, shows up in 1982, and he's only around for a couple of years. Well, for some reason, people thought he was some kind of closet liberal in the Soviet Union, but he's head of the KGB. This the guy who smashed the Hungarian uprising back in 1956, the guy in the ground. And when they attempted to stealth leave the Warsaw Pact in 1968, Czechoslovakia got smacked back in the line, and he was there for that too. I put LensCrafter model, see if you were paying attention. But you can only see he's only around for a couple of years. Brezhnev there, 64 to 82. Yuri Andropov, 82 to 84. Here's the next guy, Konstantin Chernenko, 84 to 85. See, they're not around very much. You seeing this pattern? Andropov drops off in 84. Chernenko's checking out in 85. Be nice to have somebody running the Soviet Union who wasn't playing for the 1919 Green Bay Packers, Hey, I call him Captain Respirator because at the end he was sitting on a respirator being wheeled into Politburo meetings. In fact, it was happening before he even became head of the Politburo. So they need somebody else, somebody preferably under the age of 120. And that guy's going to be Mikhail Gorbachev, a young strapping lad of 62. So Mikhail Gorbachev, he's going to be around for a while. And believe it or not, he actually gets along pretty well with Reagan. He was trying to reform the Soviet Union. You can see the system isn't working too well. Remember containment, keep it contained until the contradictions start to tear the Soviet Union apart from inside. Looks like it's starting to happen. And Gorbachev decides he can reform the Soviet system. Perestroika and glasnost. Perestroika, openness, glasnost, restructuring. So they're trying to maybe save communism or maybe alter it somewhat. Reagan had a tendency to kind of do whatever needed to be kind of done. Sometimes this stuff kind of drifted into some murky territory. Not exactly illegal, not exactly legal, but like I said, with communism and containment and everything, we ended up doing stuff we ordinarily wouldn't do, and sometimes you shouldn't really have done it. Well, November the 9th, 1989, the Berlin Wall comes down on a previous trip to Europe, to Berlin rather. Reagan was there and he, issued, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Well, on November the 9th, 1989, they finally did. And nothing, there's the Brandenburg Gate back there. Nothing says failure like when you build walls to keep people in. You keep them out because it works. You don't want them messing up your success. To keep them in means they're running away from a failure, and if you're that government, clearly you failed. So on November the 9th, 1989, the Berlin Wall comes down. People from East Germany visiting West Germany because they know they can go home again. And they've got some people in West Germany who go to see East Germany and decide they want to hang around because it's depressing. So here comes communism. It's pretty much coming to an end. I've always considered the Cold War to have ended right here in 1989, but we got a couple more steps to take. Meanwhile, in Panama, the United States military getting back into all this stuff. We had a crazy guy down here named Manuel Noriega, who's probably on the CIA payroll for a long time, never confirmed. Like I said, dealing with people we normally wouldn't deal with, doing stuff we normally wouldn't deal with. Well, apparently we had some kind of falling out with him, and he began threatening Americans in the Panama Canal Zone. So we decided to take action about it, and boom, 30,000 American soldiers show up to make sure this doesn't happen. Manuel Noriega was on TV with a machete, banging on a podium, screaming he was declaring war against the United States. Yeah, how'd that work out for you? Not so great, right? So he's sitting over there in prison in Miami, and we had to stabilize Panama because you got the canal there and about 4,000 Americans living there. So can't have people threatening Americans like that because we're going to do something about this. Well, we were hoping the end of the Cold War would lead to a peace dividend, but it seems to be a lot of conflict was unleashed with the end of the Cold War. We ended up in a war with Iraq in 1991. In 1990, Iraq had taken over Kuwait, and that put them in striking distance of the oil fields of Saudi Arabia. There's a long history between, all of these countries, Kuwait, Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and it was too close to the oil fields, and we decided we had to go protect the oil fields and sent 500,000 soldiers to Saudi Arabia in 1990, 1,000 aircraft, 6 carrier battle groups. Yeah, they're pretty interested. They're pretty serious about defending the oil. And a lot of people didn't want to be stuck in a defensive posture for years and years and years, so they decided they were going to take out Iraq. They call this Gulf War 1.0, and they unleashed the U.S. and allied, but mainly U.S. Air fleet on Iraq on January 16, 1991, and bombed the living daylights out of it for 40 days. And then we went moving in, and a quick 4-day campaign in Kuwait and adjacent parts of Iraq. We threw them out of the country. See, we had them pinned over here, and it swung around the back door, smashed and crushed them. So that's all as far as it went. We didn't go after Baghdad. It was what he called it blasting fish in a barrel because the Iraqis have been bombed for 40 days and weren't really up for fighting. We're taking thousands and thousands of prisoners. U.S. casualties, 148 killed. Some of your allies too. But as far as wars go, it wasn't really all that bad. Iraq probably a different view. But they left Saddam Hussein in place in Baghdad, and a lot of people were upset about this. That you've thrown them out of Kuwait and you left the guy in charge in Baghdad, we're going to end up back there again, like in 20 years, right? And that's what ended up happening. 12 years later, I'm going back to Iraq. But we'll get there soon enough. But in 1991, the United States had gone to war for the first time since Vietnam. We had an astounding victory, give it that. And 1991 wasn't over yet. No, because now the Soviet Union collapses. Some people, hardliners in the Soviet Union, were not happy about Gorbachev's reforms, and they decided to launch a coup to take him out and try to go back to the way it was. Problem was, the way it was wasn't that great, or else you wouldn't be in this position. So the KGB attempts to launch a coup. It doesn't work because they don't have the support of the people, and they try to call the military out to try and suppress the people, and the Soviet military will not shoot at their own people, so the entire coup collapses and Gorbachev comes back. Unfortunately, the entire Soviet Union ends up collapsing, and Russia reemerges out of this thing. Technically, Soviet Union is an alliance of all these various Soviet republics, so Russia, people just call it Russia because it's the biggest one most of the time, but now that the Soviet Union has collapsed, Russia becomes its own country. Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, all these places down here, Caucasus, Belarus, Ukraine. The whole thing sort of shatters. And Russia has a rough time in the 90s, man. They call it the second time of troubles. Remember that in the 1600s? Gorbachev, of course, goes into retirement. And Russia economy completely collapses. They've got a serious alcohol problem in the 90s, always has. It's Russia, but now it's, kind of, even by Russian standards. Their population was dropping, the whole thing. They're going to turn around the 21st century, but in the 1990s, yeah, Russia had a really rough time, and they don't like thinking about the 90s. In fact, some people were wondering maybe they should have, remained with communism because at least the country was working back then. Well, just when you thought the Cold War would deliver the peace dividend, we had, the war with Iraq. We saw the Soviet Union collapse and all the chaos breaking loose there. Well, Yugoslavia disintegrates in 1991 with the collapse of communism and no Soviet army out there threatening to invade Yugoslavia. The tenuous alliance between Orthodox Serbs in red, Catholic Croats over there, or Croatians in orange, and the Muslim Bosnians in green, the whole thing fell apart and Yugoslavia completely collapsed into a three-sided civil war. This was the worst fighting we saw in Europe since Second World War. You thought this kind of stuff didn't happen anymore in Europe, and it got worse because then there was attempted genocide of the Muslim Bosnians. They'd been there since the Ottoman Empire, and the Serbs decided they want to get rid of them completely, and they were all not death camps, but mass graves and all sorts of things found. The NATO had attempted to solve this through political means. France, Britain, and Germany took the lead, and of course they didn't do it right because they had to call us in. The United States took care of it. The Dayton Accords finally came around, and Yugoslavia was broken up into several countries. Croatia, Bosnia is its own country, Serbia, which includes this down here. The country divided its way into three ways, but there was a lot of death, a lot of destruction, the kind of thing you thought that Europe had left behind in its past. But nope, it came back. That's right, the past came right into the future because they didn't study history and didn't learn the lessons. Had a few flare ups in the 90s and the late 90s, but what used to be Yugoslavia has pretty much calmed down. They've got borders now that people have seen for the last 20 years. Now, you thought genocide was just something left in the past and this thing in Bosnia could be regarded as a weird exception. Let's head down to Rwanda. First of all, where is Rwanda? Right here, this very small country just east of Zaire. Right, it's not something on the screen. It's actually how big Rwanda is. No, it is not Wakanda from the movie Black Panther. No, no. It is kind of in the same area, though, isn't it? Well, this is a small country that really no one paid any real attention to be blunt with you. And, well, no one really had a reason to pay attention until something really bad happened. And just at the same time people are butchering each other up in Bosnia, we've decided to go berserk in Rwanda. In 1994, same time it's happening up there in Bosnia, the Hutu government, two major ethnic groups, Hutu and Tutsi, and the Hutu government decided to go berserk and annihilate 70% of their rivals, which is 20% of Rwanda's total. And in 100 days, from April of 94 to July of 94, they killed 800,000 people with machetes and rifles. That means you got to get in close to do this kind of stuff. So there was a UN-led operation in 94 to pull them apart, and it's largely succeeded. Some people were upset. They were charging you reacted faster in Bosnia than you did Rwanda, which could be true. But you have to understand, that's a lot closer, the Balkans, to France, Britain, and Germany. There's a chance of, excuse me, a chance of instability spreading throughout Europe, whereas Rwanda is very far away. And it's really, not only is it very far away, it's very hard to reach. I was had to talk to Kenya to get through over here, and a lot of people don't live in this area. And going through Zaire would be hard because of the jungle. So a lot of this is a distance problem as well, and logistics. We have stuff going on over here in Somalia, but like I said, it's very hard to reach into Africa sometimes simply because of the remoteness of some of these places. At the end of the day, these are two very bad situations, both Bosnia and Rwanda. And like I said before, everyone assumed at the end of the Cold War and the collapse of the Soviet Union, everybody was going to have this, this nice, happy time and singing and dancing together. And it turned into people hacking away and killing each other. So the peace dividend never really happened. No particular reason. I figure the last two events we talked about are very depressing, so I decided to throw in a picture of a chocolate pie. Yeah, feeling better? Good. Moving on to more depressing stuff. I did not have sexual relations with that woman. No, no, he's playing Monopoly. At the time, our president, Bill Clinton, got embroiled in a scandal at home. There, he was hanging out with this intern. I'm being polite, who wasn't clearly his wife. And at the same time, a flare up in the Balkans, which a lot of people felt could have been solved through diplomacy. Instead, President Clinton was accused of facing a lot of bad things at home, and he was accused of trying to pull everyone's attention away by bombing Serbia. So they sent everything into Serbia to try and push them away from the Bosnians, and they said the timing was rather interesting with the whole Lewinsky thing. And we lost one of our stealth bombers. We used this thing in the Gulf War and everyone got the paint scratched. We tried to bomb Serbia, we actually lose one. And they tried to lie. They tried to deny that one had been shot down, but, here's some Serbian soldiers standing here with it, got it in a museum. And I'm trying to show you how interconnected the world has become. A U.S. domestic scandal leads to a U.S. Military response in the Balkans, where you actually lose one of these planes. And this allegedly was sent to the White House from Serbia as a card. Yeah, I'm not sure if I believe it or not, but it's not something the Serbs would do. But here's what I'm trying to get at. Everything's interconnected. A U.S. domestic uh, scandal leads to a U.S. military response where we lose a plane. And of course, the Serbians, not very happy with us, sent pieces of this plane to both China and Russia. And guess what? They got their own stealth fighter now. So you have to be careful when you do stuff like this. You have to react to whatever you think is going to work. And you have to think about what kind of repercussions your actions are going to have in the future. So we were the only nation with a stealth fighter, and then after this, China and Russia developed their own. So basically, you've created an enemy in the Balkans, and you've given Russia and China stealth technology, and they're going to become our competitors in the 21st century. Got to think ahead. Well, that came Y2K. Everyone was terrified that the computers were shut down, and everyone was terrified their coffee makers wouldn't work, and other people were upset looking at that same scene over and over in the Terminator, where it's rolling over a pile of human skulls. Well, December 1931 dawned, and January 1st, 2000, absolutely nothing changed. That's the street in front of my house. Same picture, at my time anyway. Same picture, but nothing had changed. That's the point I'm making. Y2K was blown way out of proportion. No apocalypse, but don't worry, we've got plenty of time for that later on down the road because, you know how human beings are. We try to destroy ourselves because, I don't know, I guess we have nothing else better to do. Well, we had an election in 2000 between George W. Bush and Al Gore, and this thing kind of went into overtime. That's the electoral vote, and that's why I put overtime. We finally decided to go with Bush. Supreme Court had to stick their nose into this. But the reason I bring this up is because we had a disputed election, and there was no civil war, nobody out in the streets, no psychotic upheaval, discord. The military didn't march. Now, a lot of countries this happens. In this country, it doesn't happen. We have an election, we have a dispute, we talk it out, we come to a solution. Al Gore wasn't very happy about it because he lost, but he at the end said, although he disagreed, he was still going to abide by the decision, and off he went. That's something that doesn't happen a lot in the rest of the world. And we had a disputed election at the beginning of the century, and nothing happened. We solved it. It's a good example for the rest of the world, particularly when you've seen what happened in Bosnia, Rwanda, and this was actually a good event to begin the new century, which of course led to a bad event. Right? George Bush, who won again in 2004, no one got upset about it. On September the 11th, we know what happened here. Osama bin Laden had claimed credit for a terrorist attack that ended up killing nearly 3,000 people in New York. Both towers came down. Another plane was brought down in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, when the passengers overwhelmed the terrorist crew there. Another plane was hijacked and smashed into the Pentagon. And this has led to U.S. involvement in the Middle East over the last 20 years. It's like playing pool. You hit a ball, it hits another ball. This is the cue ball. It hit another one, and we end up getting mixed up in Iraq again, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria. We're going to get to that in the next chapter here. Very sorry to end on a depressing note, but you know what they say. It gets bad, you can always make it better. Of course, you can also screw up and make it worse. We're going to find out what happens next. Have a great day.